Thursdays. I'm going to make sure that we're live on the right channels. This is a very exciting day as we talk about Dancing in the Narrows with Anna Penenberg. But first, it looks like we are live on Facebook. Give us a shout if you are making sure that we're live. Give us a shout if you are live with us right now. I see that we are on the correct page right there. Great. And we are live there. Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to wait a few minutes. This is what always happens. Anna's waiting backstage. And we're going to give it about 4 minutes. Say hi if you're here. I see, let's see, 3, 4 people are on now. If you want to look up this book, Dancing in the Narrows, please do. Although we're going to talk a lot about it and tell you why you should eventually read it. Not eventually, tomorrow you should read it. But in the meanwhile, you know, just say hi if you're there so we can see. We're on a platform where we can see your messages come through. So I'm just trying to see where everybody is. And I just have to say I'm very, very excited about today. Michelle, Aaron, if you're watching, thank you for reaching out and saying you must read this book and you must reconnect with Anna and you must. And it's been a blessing already in my life to have done so. So thank you. I don't know if the chat feature is working on here. Let's see. And just as a note, we will, I will be away actually on vacation for the next 2 weeks. So I think we're going to go back and play some reruns from the very beginning of the pandemic from like March and April. So that'll be interesting to see how things have changed. That'll be really crazy to follow. But yeah, this is Think About It Thursdays with author, longtime congregant Anna Penenberg. I'm going to rattle for another just 2 minutes while people get settled. People are shy and they're not saying hi, but you know, please say hi because I see you're on. And let us know what you're thinking about today. But yeah, this is Think About It. Oh, I see people are writing good morning. So the chat just is not coming through to us, Anna. It's coming through, if you're listening to me, looks like it's coming through on, let's see if it works here. Looks like I'm going to have to look at the, looks like I'm going to have to look at the individual channels. Good morning, sis. Good morning, May. Good morning, Michelle, who is, Michelle is acting as Temple Emmanuel today. We'll just say you're the official ambassador as you read. And for some reason, the chat is not coming through on our Restream platform, but that's okay because you guys are there. And in just 1 minute, I am going to talk a little bit about the book and introduce you to Anna, which I'm so excited about. Okay. In 60 seconds, I am going to read this book summary to you. I really wish that I could see the chat underneath, but give me a second. And yes, Michelle, you are the ambassador. Okay, so let me go ahead and and give you the summary of this book, and then I will bring on Anna. So, Dancing in the Narrows chronicles a mother and daughter's multi-year journey through illness and trauma. At 16, Anna's youngest daughter, Dana, is stricken with a mysterious debilitating condition, eventually diagnosed as Lyme disease. Desperate to find a cure, the two women are thrust into the established medical world, then far beyond. Full of adventure, humor, and blind faith, Dancing in the Narrows is an inspiring story of self-discovery as a single mother fights to save the life of her child. So without further ado, I am going to introduce Anna. Let's see, Anna, give me the thumbs up that you're ready. All right, here we go. Dun, 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 dun. Hello, Anna.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
I'm very, very excited. I can't believe that we are 8 months into this pandemic, and this program has been sort of an evolving result of wanting to highlight members in our community and beyond, and bring important facts, important stories to the Temple Emmanuel community, and I should say and beyond, because it's not just Temple Emmanuel these days. But first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and talk about your book. And I know that it's from a very vulnerable place. So I just want to say thank you before we even start.
Thank you, Lizzie, and thanks for reading and taking an interest. And it's a great way to reconnect with Temple Emmanuel.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thrilled to be talking to you. So Anna, why don't we, before we take a deep dive into the book, why don't you give us a little bit of a background of just your connection to Emmanuel and Judaism and our connection, and tell us just like a little bit about that.
So, actually, my mother, her family was a member of Temple Emmanuel when it first began, and it wasn't yet on the site it is now. So that was very many years ago. And then in my childhood, when I was in the third grade, we moved to Beverly Hills near Robertson and Olympic, and Temple Emmanuel became our community and our Jewish home. And at that time, they didn't have a day school. I went to Sunday school and then Hebrew school and then Hebrew High. I have to say I was one of very few who decided to continue along, but I thought it was great learning Hebrew. And then to my getting married and raising my children, we moved up the street for a while from my parents, and we joined Temple Emmanuel. And my daughters went to the day school, and that's where we met Lizzie in one of the many intergenerational plays that Neely Kosmal was directing and singing together, and having a great time with our families because it was intergenerational. And at one point, I was in a scene with your dad who never learned his lines, and it was a hilarious scene anyway. It was a dream scene, and I think Ryan was the patient, and we were doing this fake surgery, and weird things were coming out. It was a dream scene, and so very unpredictable and hilarious. And your dad was unbelievable because we never knew what he was going to say, and then we had to just play it by ear. But amateur acting was not something I had a lot of background in. So I guess
1 second, Anna, because some people are saying they can't hear you, and I just want to make sure that they can hear you before we talk. I think we can hear you. Oh no, they must be. Yes, they can hear you. Fantastic.
Okay.
So we're going back to intergenerational productions. My dad, who should not be on the stage, was on the stage.
But one of the brilliant things that was happening at Temple Emmanuel was in the community was that this idea that we could share intergenerationally. And so in the first play that we did, there was something like 60 people in it. Yeah. And my parents were in it, and me and my daughters, and Dana was 5, and she was the youngest person in the production. And then there was, I don't know, somebody in their 80s. And it was just a rich environment for us all, and very joyous.
Yeah, and I believe my grandmother was in it too. I forgot that aspect of.
That's right, your grandmother was.
Yeah, she was. Oh, yeah. What a special time.
Great.
So yeah, definitely a blast from the past, and amazing to I told Rabbi Aaron and I talk about there's that one play that he wrote, and I'm always like, I have no recollection of being in it. He's like, I have a program, and just the other day he sent it, and it just made me so nostalgic and just so grateful for that part of my life when I was growing up. Where Judaism and performance and ritual really just mashed into a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I probably should have said when I started this, and Anna knows this when we spoke the other day, but I have been, putting aside time to read the book. And in Like How Things Go in a Crazy World, I finally this past Sunday had a chance, and I sat down on my balcony and I read the book for about 6 hours straight. It is very just engaging, and it's one of those books that you just can't put down. And, I have some things to say about that later, which I'll have to tell you why I think you can't put it down. But I couldn't put it down, number one, because of the story, but number two, because of the beautiful way that you write, Anna. And one of the things, of course, as a Jewish professional that really was interesting was that I would notice just little pieces of Judaism woven throughout, almost to a point where if you weren't Jewish or you weren't very, very knowledgeable, you could kind of skip through it and be like, oh, a talit, I don't know what that is. I'll just keep reading. But for me, I was like, oh, well, this is Anna's Jewish soul and Jewish background really, really coming through. Hold on, I'm going back to the question that I was meaning to ask. Here we go. So that leads me to, I asked Anna wanted to read just like a piece, an excerpt of the book. And maybe you can say why you chose this. Maybe you want to read it first. But I want you all to hear just a little section about from the book.
So I chose this passage. I mean, the whole story and the whole odyssey that we went on when my daughter became ill and no one knew what to do and what it was. It took us in a very long, kind of zigzaggy direction. And so there's many themes in my book. And I just wanted to read this one because we're talking about my Jewish soul and some of the things that I grew up with and was exposed to because my mother is an artist. And so it highlights the influences of ancient cultures in my life and childhood and how that supported me during this part of my life where I was deeply challenged with my daughter's health crisis. And it's in a chapter called Ancient Influences. And so what you need to know is that Dana's now been sick for 4 years. Kayla she's my older daughter. Dana is the one who got Lyme disease. And Kayla has just graduated college and gone to Senegal for 3 months to train in traditional West African dance. And so here we go. Kayla was taken to a Senegalese healer named El Hadji. He had gone to harvest this special bark to treat her and her sister. The medicine would heal Kayla and her sadness and guilt if she drank it for 1 month and buried the remains in the earth. Kayla sipped her boiled bark water every day, hoping it would diminish the pain of losing her sister to an illness. Dana's bark was sent to me from Senegal, wrapped in paper bag with special instructions. The natural cure came at a time when Dana was following an aggressive pharmaceutical protocol. It would be too dangerous to mix the two. I held the bag with my fingers entwined tightly around it, my tears soaking in. I placed it on my meditation altar. Maybe here the miracle could take place between medicines, between sisters, between cultures. between healing forces. I sat peacefully in front of my altar. The dark brown tree bark lay there in its place of honor, representing a confluence of worlds. Tiny pearls of sweat collected on my forehead. My palms became moist. The bark had unraveled something in my soul. I had grown up in an old Spanish-style home in West Los Angeles. Its soft, earthy lines, arched doorways, tile floors, contrasted with the straight modern lines of my mother's Danish teak furniture. Hanging on the wall was a large canvas covered with my mother's thick knife strokes in oil paint, depicting Degas-inspired ballet dancers in pink tutus. My parents never traveled to Africa, but we had 2 wooden ceremonial African masks hanging above the hearth. My mother had seen them in an import store and had fallen in love. As a teenager, I would sit on the bright orange couch in the living room, staring at the masks while listening to the Beatles sing, "Do You Want to Know a Secret?" I wondered, what would the masks whisper to me if I got close enough? Would the wide forehead confer wisdom? What kind of power would these masks impart? What would I become if I wore one? I had a sense that what they had to teach me was beyond what I knew of my family, my religion, and my culture. I was raised in seasons punctuated by Jewish holiday celebrations. On my sacred 13th birthday, I entered womanhood chanting in Hebrew from a centuries-old Torah scroll made of real parchment. A record of me singing during my bat mitzvah service was kept in the stereo cabinet. Also in the living room, on top of the upright piano, was a 3-foot-long ram's horn nestled in a crocheted orange and pink shawl my grandmother had made. The shofar was difficult to play, but you could hear loud, strange sounds coming from our house at the high holy days. Purim, on the full moon of the spring equinox, was when we all wore costumes, including masks. I loved it because it was a joyous holiday with dancing and noise-making and booing and cheering and singing and shouting. I first experienced the power of putting on a mask during Purim, when I impersonated the exquisite Queen Esther, who risked her life to save her people. Being Esther, I felt I could conquer anything. Now I sat at the altar with the Senegalese bark before me. It had me in a trance. I felt the medicine man and the indigenous tree who offered its skin. I heard Kayla's cries, a chorus of powerful prayers. Hope rose through my chest into my throat, where hushed sounds formed, and I sang a glorious blessing for healing in Hebrew, the Mishabera.
That Dana was in, the pain that you were in. I'm looking at comments. I'm going to interrupt myself to just say that that Michelle's mom, Marcia, has to send her love and says hi. But so hi, Marcia. But that when you were just reading the section about Esther, who's known for this concept of wearing a mask, of not being who you are, one of the things that really struck me in your book and in your adventure, and I'd love to hear a little bit if you agree with me, is that I didn't feel like you guys were ever putting on a mask or trying to be different than the people, trying to appear different than the challenges that you were going through. And I think we haven't talked about this, but if you read the book, you'll see that Anna has a history in like psychology and somatic healing and all of this stuff, and how she raised her kids in nature that allowed them to experience this tragic journey, but not with this sense that they were trying to hide something. Like, so I was thinking about that with Esther and wearing masks. And in Judaism, on Purim, we put on these masks, and there's a lot of midrash about kind of how we wear masks ourselves. So maybe before we go on to the next question, can you talk a little bit about, did you ever feel self-conscious out in the world? Or, I mean, again, I got the sense that you guys were who you were and what you were going through, and didn't try to necessarily hide that.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that Lyme disease is not very well understood. It wasn't, we live in California. Most people think it doesn't even exist here, which is not true. And so we just weren't believed half the time, a lot of the time. And then we had to make decisions about what doctors we wanted to listen to and whether they knew enough, or we had to kind of trust our own intuition. And at one point, after many tests and many trials, we just, and the doctor wanting to put Dana on antidepressants, which wasn't a terrible idea. It was just another pharmaceutical, and it wasn't the real problem. And Dana was very adamant, so her voice is quite well heard throughout the book. She did not want to mask the pain. She wanted to find out what was going on. And so our heroic journey, kind of like Joseph Campbell, who says, we must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. And that's sort of a mythological perspective on life, archetypal. And it somehow felt that way to me, that it was bigger than most people understood, and that we were going to have to feel our way through it and trust ourselves. And that's really tricky with a teenager who just is not very happy that her life is dissolving and she's in pain and her friends aren't coming over and she can't go to school. And so there was sort of a crisis between us where we had to become a team and really listen to each other. And she had to depend on me in ways that she would not normally have done as a teenager.
Absolutely. A lot of what you talk about in the book, and people should know, I'll just to give like a sentence or two, that Lyme disease, some people get a tick, they find out, they know they have the tick, they get it tested, they find out that the tick was carrying Lyme, they take antibiotics, and they're pretty much, the antibiotics takes care of it, and they don't have to go through the suffering. In terms of Dana, you guys don't know exactly the moment that she might have gotten bitten, and these symptoms started when she was in 10th grade. And Dana had a case, has for her whole life, a case of Lyme disease that's, I think you said, in the top 10% of like the worst way that you can get Lyme disease, unfortunately. So
I would just add to that if not caught and treated, and for, most people, that is fine and that works. Some people do have a relapse even after the first treatment. But
interesting.
When you don't know you've had a tick bite and people can't figure out why you have these symptoms, Dana then became a chronic case. And that was the upper 10% of the patients that had been seen that she was the sickest. It had probably been going on for 7 years, but she was very healthy, and she kind of fended it off until it really took down her immune system.
Right. And definitely when you read the book, you'll see there were a couple little hints of maybe something starting to happen. But again, the Lyme world has made a lot of progress, you would say, in the last 15 years.
I would. There's still the Wild West of Lyme disease treatment, where there's so much more online, and there's so many more groups and so many foundations now to help people. Back then, Dana, when she went online and had a little support group, she was like the youngest person ever. But people share information, and they're trying this and they're trying that, and they literally will, if they think it's a fairly decent shot at treating something, one of their symptoms, even they'll try it. And so you'll see the kind of adventure that we went on with alternative medicine, but in a very large context of one's life, what you experience educates you. And Dana has become an amazing healer in her own right and is a craniosacral and Reiki practitioner. She's also a doula. Sometimes she and I share clients and work together. She herself had tried so many different disciplines that she knows what they can do and what they yield.
Absolutely. By the way, Sharon Baumgold says, who was in our Herkiness and shows with us, says, my niece who lives in California has Lyme disease. So be particularly interesting. I think Anna and I talked about this a lot, that, you know, a lot of people might be attracted to read the book to see how they fixed Dana. And that, you know, in some ways that's what makes you keep reading the book is, okay, well, what was the solution? Like, what's the cure? And although you made a lot of progress, I'm going to tell you now, read the book with that kind of anticipation, but know that, you know, Dana still works, even though she's really in a much better place now, that this is a long journey. Right? Would you say that's fair to say?
I would say that, you know, it's not proper to say that there is a cure, and people always want to know what the cure is.
Right.
And but I would say that it evolves you on your path, because you must pay deep attention to how you feel and how to treat your body and how to regulate yourself and how to spiritually align yourself so that you can deal with pain when that comes. Dana actually is, you know, 98% well. My promise to her, and I think this is an important principle for parenting and anyone living a life, is that when you hold an intention, it can actually have a very large impact, just as a prayer does. And I decided right at the beginning that she wasn't going to live this way. And I think it empowered me not to listen to some doctors who were kind of taking a stab at trying something, and me feeling like, you know, I know my daughter, she's not lying about how she feels, and we're going to go with how I feel about this and what feels right to do. And eventually I handed it to Dana and followed what she was really skilled at feeling herself.
Right.
When she got sort of well enough, because in the beginning she couldn't think well.
Right.
So I feel
can
like
say, you know, a couple of the things that, you know, she had just headaches and very high sensitivity to light and just all senses, right? Light and smells. Anna talks a lot about, you know, only cooking what Dana needed and only saying things that she knew wouldn't like be hyper reactive to Dana. And there's a sense of that was you tiptoeing around, but you saw your daughter in tremendous amount of pain. And I know you didn't want to do anything that would cause her more pain. She had swelling. She had, I'm sure we could go on and on and on. And one of the most fascinating sections of the book is when you tried a lot of different diets. I just have to say that when you talk about the humor, like some of the things, I think at one point you're holding like an eyeball and you're just like, this is what we're supposed to eat, like a fish eye or something. So I was definitely laughing, even amidst this kind of desperation to find something that would give her relief. And there's a journey. There's a lot of car journeys in this book. We're going to get to that. But I do want to say one thing, which is, could you have ever imagined that this book would have come out during a global pandemic?
No. Oh my God, no. And actually, you know, I'm a new author. This is my first book, so I'm like all excited. I'm going to set up these book tours and everything. And right about when I was scheduling that, things were just shutting down. And I was like, oh my God, what will I do? And then I started seeing the parallels to what was happening to people, and they were in their homes and they spent a lot of time in their homes. And this was like what happened to me in my personal life with Dana's illness and her environmental sensitivities, which is a very weak immune response to light and sound and everything.
Right.
And so we were very isolated. My family really didn't come over either. Everything was, very difficult for her at that time. And so she was on the couch and we were at home. And my big, foray into the world was to go to the market. And and I started realizing how appropriate it was that my book was going out during COVID. And then I kept thinking, well, by July, will everything will open back up and I will have planned this, Zoom thing. And of course, that is not at all true. And people are living and have adjusted to some degree, but the psychological and the new skills that are required in this life of self-care and spiritual practice, or however you like to think of that, some way to right your mind and your positivity every day, and you know have meaning in your life, and to the loss of community, like being in the room with people. I think we've adjusted to Zoom and it's been fantastic, but we are missing something. And you know, it's quite the parallel. Also, you know, dealing with COVID has been a scary thing about an illness possibly happening to you, and if not, trying to make yourself safe and feel safe around people. And what's interesting is I find that people are having some difficulty just experiencing joy. Like, is it okay for me to have some fun? Because times are so difficult, and now that we'll make our way through the election, but the pressure of that is in the air. And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of constrictions in people's lives. But I sincerely feel that the uncertainty and the unknown is really interesting to learn to live with, because it is a doorway and it will inform you more about yourself and more about what you truly are wanting in your life.
Yeah, the parallels there. It's funny, even though we talked about this, I didn't even put together the going to the market is like the big. Most people will say that, like, if they're even going to the market, that is the day. I think someone posted like a meme the other day that said, "I'm looking forward to the day where the most exciting thing that I do in the week isn't going to the grocery store." um, but for you, it definitely was. And we should say you went to a nice Whole Foods and you had massage you had a guy who did chair massages. So that is a lovely, lovely thing to do. By the way, I'm going to put up our little book title just for a few minutes so people can see it there. So I said to Anna after I read this book, and again, I've already talked about, I feel like people might flock originally because they want to find a cure to Lyme disease, and they think that they're going to find a cure by reading Anna's book, because if you read a book, you must have the answers, right? Um, and again, that's something that keeps you really engaged in the book, because you're like, well, how did they fix her? How did they, Um, so what? So if the reason to read the book isn't to get a cure for Lyme disease, then why do you want people to read the book? What lessons are you seeking for people to perhaps learn if they're open to them?
Yeah, I think that even though this is a story particularly about that, the themes and the bigger lessons here are quite vast. How do you deal with yourself during challenge? I pretty much wrote this book because I had been journaling to just, stay sane. And then I put some things together and I decided that I almost needed to write a whole story so I could figure out what happened to me and how I survived it and what did I do. And um, so, you know, the lessons here are for any human being, not just a parent of a child who has a chronic illness.
Mhm.
Um, but how do you live your life? You know, how do you manage when things happen that change everything in your life? And how do you grieve? Um, how do you take care of yourself under very restricted conditions? You know, taking care of myself was like, 10 minutes in the bath, reading a really superficial, lightweight, romantic novel so I could get into a story that I knew was going to be safe and everybody was going to be fine. Um, Picking a flower in the garden and bringing it in because I knew Dana loved that flower, and just having beauty. Um, I think in times of challenge, we forget some of these elements, and we forget to breathe. So,
So,
yeah.
so not forgetting to breathe is definitely a lesson. um, and we're gonna. I know there's some other lessons that you're gonna talk about. I do want to just commend you, and I hinted this at the beginning, but in many ways your life was aligned. I don't necessarily believe in the fact that you're given things that you can handle. In my own personal life, I don't think that's true. You know, people will say, well, God wouldn't have given you this challenge if you couldn't handle it or something like that. But I do believe that there are the way that you brought up your kids, and I said this, but with nature and just with a certain openness, I think puts you guys on this journey towards being able to be open to healing. And I think a lot of people live in a world of blinders. And actually, Anna and I talked about this, that there could have been parents, and I'm sure there are parents and just patients who live like with this, well, I'm just going to do what the doctors tell me. And they end up in the hospital for, 6 times a year, being given antidepressants and pain medications. And there was a third thing I think that we were talking about, that people
Sleep,
are,
sleep
and sleep.
medicine.
Oh, and sleep medication. That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Because Dana did suffer from not really being able to sleep. Definitely not at the normal hours of the night. And that I think that you that while I don't think you're given challenges just because you can handle it, I think that you are in a unique place to accept accept these challenges. So that leads us into maybe spiritual practices you started to talk about, but in terms of the lessons of this book.
Um, well, I think you're kind of characterizing this thing about what happens with pain, and do we does the journey with pain determine who you are, or does it become part of the process in which you discover who you are and more about yourself and
Mm.
more about your soul? Um, and so I have had a very long practice. When I was pregnant with Kayla, I started doing Kundalini yoga because I found a sort of pregnant mom's class, and there wasn't much yoga around, and I stumbled into it, and it has really helped me throughout my life. I would play quietly all night long some of the mantras or some Jewish prayers, because I knew that would soothe me, and I would, use some of the practices to just stay strong, because I knew if I went down, nobody would be able to help Dana get well. And that was actually, I didn't realize it, but later on I realized that that was kind of a hidden fear that I had, like if something happened to me. And And so those practices and really nature is another one of my practices. And in the book, I have a whole chapter on a place that up in Topanga became a really great, wonderful thing to do when Dana could manage it to hike up to it. There's a labyrinth up here, and that is another form of ritual where you're walking into something and it brings you somewhere and you wind your way in and you sit for a while and say what you have to say or pray what you want to pray and and then you unwind yourself out and you feel different. And so that was a really nice thing that we got to do and still do.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. Um, we're going to go through kind of, so one of the things that you talked about was even like in pain is how you choose. I mean, you did just say, what does your pain teach about you, as opposed to, how do you bend to your pain? Like, it's a back and forth issue, but how do you find joy when you're going through something like this?
Well, I think I learned that about myself. My dad was a very engaged in life kind of person, and my mom as well. And so I actually felt like when I had to take Dana to Santa Fe, New Mexico for a treatment at a clinic, I felt like I was being my dad, like I got the car all ready and I put all the stuff in it. And
Right.
because, we were always going camping and being together like that. And um, I, I mean, down to some really silly stuff that only Dana and I would find funny, maybe like taking all of her, you know, myriad of bottles of supplements and piling them up and seeing if we could get them to be one tower, or making a poem out of all of their names. And um, every day something little like that, laughing at how every day I had to carry down in those days it was more like a big air filter because the air always had to be filtered for her. And, I'd be bringing that down and bringing it up to when she would sleep in her room. And, I mean, just sort of laughing at things and making it fun. I I built a raised bed garden so that I could get her to come out of the house and be with her plants that I knew she couldn't avoid because she loves things growing. And so that provided a means for which she could feel some joy and pleasure,
Wow.
even when she was in pain.
Um, so the book, one of the things you said to me was, this isn't as much a book about Dana as it was about your experience. And you just spoke about this, but another thing to explore, that people can explore as they read the book, is this parenting relationship. And can you speak further as to this theme of parenting? And do some people do it right and some people do it wrong? And how do you reconcile that?
I think it's not so much about right and wrong, but we're always in life in an experience that we're creating. And so, I got to be a single mom, which wasn't necessarily my first hope, but I was a single mom going through this. And if that wasn't enough with two teenagers, then I had one who was in pain and we had to figure it out. And it went on for uh, the major part 10 years, but really 12. And that's a long time. And, you know, um, what was your question?
Parenting, just like the
Oh,
theme
parenting.
of parenting. Yeah.
So what I was going to say is that that somewhere in this, I always had the instinct to because I'm kind of a developmentalist anyway, because I've worked with children and all kinds of things. And I was always had an eye on preserving who she is, never mind the illness, never mind the pain.
Right.
And now she's 16, now she's 18, now she's 20. How can she be and develop appropriately for her age, regardless of these constrictions that kept getting quite severe? And so, you know, I and how does she have an avenue to express herself? Because this was a girl who was dancing like 10 hours a week before she got really sick. And, great student, doing very well. And then she couldn't like really focus and study very well. And she was worried. She didn't tell me, but she thought she was getting stupid. And then she couldn't get up off the couch. And so then she would draw, and then her hands got too weak to hold the pencil. So I hired somebody to come over and do voice lessons, and she sang, all these very bold and fierce women like Patti Smith songs, and until she didn't have enough breathing, enough air in her lungs to keep singing. And then we just kept inventing things. But I held that space for her. She needed to keep being herself in whatever possible way,
And I think that's
including
important. It's important for people to remember as you read the book, like you get very drawn into her pain and your doctor adventures and stuff like that. But really, what you didn't write about, but you're talking about right now, as much is kind of that. What were the daily things that she continued to do, like trying to study, like you're talking, that she kept doing. And that's the face of Lyme disease, is that there are many people who are still trying their best to live this normal life. I just can't imagine. Dana went to college and went through ultimately these parts of life to where she is today, even while really suffering.
Dana was on the couch. She had graduated. It was kind of a miracle.
Right.
And because she would have some stretches, depending on what we were doing, where she would feel a little better. And, but not well. She just would push herself. And so she graduated, and then we moved to Topanga, and she applied to all kinds of colleges, Lewis and Clark, Bennington College. And she got a scholarship at both of those, and she refused to go to Lewis and Clark, even though she was lying on the couch. And I'm thinking, when is this ever going to happen? She wanted to go to Bennington because they had a dance department. And I was like, okay, And so that really shows that I did something well, because she still maintained that she was going to get where she wanted to go. And in the end, the dancing and the amazing classes at the program in Bennington College that had somatic arts and things were very healing to her, to be in her body. Even it helped move things, and it helped the pain. And she became much more aware and embodied. And she actually choreographed this amazing piece for her senior project, where they built a tub 6 inches deep of water, and she choreographed this piece going into the water. And it was kind of like what happens when you're embryologically developing and coming out. And then she choreographed like 6 dancers doing this, and it was just astounding and creative, and it helped her so much. So we never know.
Yeah, you never know. And now here she is as a healer in the world in Los Angeles. People can look her up on DanaPenenberg.com and work with Dana or work with Anna. And who knows if she would have found this place of her inherent heart had she not gone through this. Again, I wish she hadn't lived that life of pain. I wish you hadn't had to go through that, but who knows, in 30 years, you'll look back and say, wow, that was a blip in our timeline. We really only have like 10 minutes left. So there's a couple of other things that we wanted to talk about. One is kind of just the field of healing and healing arts and that kind of stuff. And then I think the other thing is, the mother-daughter relationship. We talked about that a little bit, but so if we can spend, 2 minutes on healing and 2 minutes on mother-daughter, and then if anyone has questions, please do write them in. But also you can purchase this book on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and type in Dancing in the Narrows. And then put aside a day, because you're not going to want to get off the couch. You're going to want to read it all day long. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about healing and a little bit about the mother-daughter relationship in the book.
So, I think there is this sort of continuous discovery of what is healing, not what is medicine, but what is healing.
Right.
And healing is a much broader concept of all the parts of us, some that are physical and some that are not. And so Dana and I talk a lot about what happens in the relational field, the energy around you that is you, and it's in the field when you're with a person. And so because we've worked on each other as well, sort of healing from this full adventure, I came up with this word called the shared healing field, but I think that it's just a name because we're always in that. We're really pressed to use that now with COVID at 6 feet apart. To feel like you're almost hugging someone that you want to greet, or it's that field where you sense the other person. And healing does happen in the field, and of course that's actually the work Dana does, which uses the craniosacral system and the wave rhythms in one's nervous system in your own body, but it does have a magnetic field to it and does really create a lot of healing when it's in balance. And in some ways that is sort of where we went on the Lyme journey, to the much more energetic medicines that because putting things into her system really got too much for her body. So she ended up really healing more with homeopathics and energy work.
And continues to.
Yeah.
How do you, looking back on how you dealt with the best of times and the worst of times as a parent, where would you say you still feel like you really succeeded? Where have you learned that you would have done something differently, perhaps? And what do you think if a young parent read this book, what would you hope that they took away from the lessons you learned as a parent going through this?
One thing I would say is keep yourself in balance in any way that works for you. Yoga, taking 10 minutes to be quiet in the morning before you start your day and hit the pavement. Try to be in balance, and be strong in your navel, because children will pull on you emotionally, and the day will most likely never go the way you planned. And that's just having family life. I don't think I was good or bad ever, but I didn't like some of the things I did, and they actually turned out to be good. Like one time, Dana was so sick, and I yelled at her because I just had it, and she was so cranky, and I ran after her, and she hadn't run in years, and she was running to her room, and I was chasing her, and I said to her, it's in the book actually, I said, no one ever died from being angry. And I was like, why did I say that? You know, but I was so mad. Um, and so what I want to say is that the repair is really important. If you've lost it, if you've done something you don't like, sit down with your kids, have a moment with that. Parents are people and they are fallible, but you are responsible for all of it, and you're responsible for the repair. And that will teach your children how to come back into themselves and how to become whole and balanced.
Yeah, I'm just realizing that I could be wrong, but I don't think there was any place, at least in the book, where you guys in exasperation said, why would God do this to me? Or why was I given this, why was I given the short end of the stick? Or, anything like that. Is that, I don't think. I'm trying to look
Well,
back again.
because of my background and everything, I'm not a fan of being a victim. So, you know,
Right.
we didn't do that. Dana actually cried a lot because she lost friends. People couldn't relate to her. They were all off doing fun things as young people whose bodies felt really healthy and music and dancing, and she lost out, and she was very sad and grieving, but she wasn't a victim. Um, and when that sort of poor me stuff comes up, it's like, well, let's take a breath, and what is it that you need?
Ugh, but that, again, not that's a strength that you guys, that I'll continue to say, that I think that you have as a person yourself, that you passed on to both your daughters, and just to read this adventure makes you want to get to know all three of you, Dana and Kayla, and you, Anna, because it does make you feel like you can have a more open heart, that you can repair yourself, and that life is this never-ending journey of change, of evolution, I should say, and that perhaps it took this illness to evolve both of you. But again, if you going back to that butterfly, it's like this was your cocoon for a while, and then you emerged into a very different, beautiful, beautiful place. And
Well,
maybe
actually, the first story you read in the introduction is about this magical thing that happened when my children were little, and they collected caterpillars. And
right.
it's a long story, but it's kind of a child story almost, because we had bug boxes, and one of the caterpillars made a chrysalis, and then it came out, but the top of the bug box was on, and when it was born, its wing was folded and it never opened. And so we actually had this butterfly as a pet until, it didn't live long, as butterflies do, but we got very close to it, and brought it to flowers to nourish itself. And so the whole metaphor of that as a gift, something that is imperfect.
Your friend Alicia Magal just commented, such faith and strength over a really long, long time. So hi, Alicia. I'm glad that you're here. I cannot believe that an hour went by so quickly. You can again purchase Dancing in the Narrows on Amazon. And Anna, is there any last farewell prayer or anything that you would like to give to everyone who's watching? I want to thank everyone on Facebook and YouTube. I'm sorry, it looks like there was a little bit of fuzziness, but we'll look at that after. And worst comes to worst, we'll have to do it again because I could talk to you all over again. But any closing words that you want to share? And of course, thank you again for spending the morning with me.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. It was such a pleasure. And I just wish all of you really balanced and loving days in your life as we proceed through these challenges.
With that, we say thank you. We'll see you next week, everybody. Thank you so much.